Okay, here we are. We're going to be back. This is going to be putting, of course, we know the genuine MoonSwatch movement into the Pagani designed case. We did it already with the replica. We know that that fit. We used the existing Eyes on the Stars case back movement holder. It has the ring shape instead of the hat shape. This one works fine when using the Pagani case with the replica PE50 movement. We've already tested that in the first part of this video. So now we're going to go with the genuine. This is a mission to the moon, as we know, and this whole process starts with taking lots of measurements. So the measurements to begin with, we're going to want to take the measurement of the inside of the case here, the diameter. We're going to want to measure the depth of the case. We're going to want to measure how far these pushers are from where the dial sits in here. Maybe I should get a little closer and show you this better. All right, so obviously the width is important because we need to make the ring to fit in there. This happens to have a two-step, I'm going to try to show this to you as best I can. It's got a two-step dial seat in there. The inside measurement is where the dial actually sits, and then the outside is the case. So I made, for this, I've jumped ahead and I've made a ring that sits in there on both levels. It's kind of a stepped ring, and that's going to bring my dial back a little bit, and we're going to cover that in a second. So you want the diameter here, you're going to want the depth from where the dial sits to the back of the case. Then you're going to want to find out how much extra depth you have in the case back by measuring from here to the outside or to the bottom of these threads, and then subtracting it from the total depth of the case on the inside. And in this case, we have, I'm just going to pull up my measurement sheets because I've already taken all these measurements in here. I'll just freeze it on here in case you want to look at them. So that measurement we just talked about, we're looking at the case back has a total depth of 2.45 millimeters. And then that step right here is 1.45. So you take that, because once you screw this all the way in so it sits flush with the case back, this part disappears and all you have is the difference as far as depth. So what we're looking at is an additional 1 millimeter. So total depth in this case, and I'm trying to go slow here as best I can, the total amount of space we have to work with and depth-wise is from where that dial sits right there all the way to the back of this case, which when you subtract this measurement here equals in another 1 millimeter. So we know that the total depth is 6 millimeters plus the 1 millimeters gives us a total depth of 7 millimeters. That's what we're looking at. So this will be important when we start developing the ring for it, because we need to know how thick that ring needs to be. But it also tells us whether the depth of the case is going to help us determine where those pushers line up. And as we know, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but as we know, these pushers on this movement, they sit about 2.25 millimeters. The center of those is about 2.25 millimeters from where the dial sits. So those pushers in this case need to have that same dimension. In that, what we do is we take the total case back dimension, which is 6 millimeters, or sorry, the total inside case depth, which is 6 millimeters, and so we subtract how far that pusher is off the back of this movement. And I've already taken that measurement, and that measurement from the center of this pusher to the back of the case is 2.75 millimeters. So we know 6 millimeters minus 2.75 millimeters equals 3.25 millimeters. I already done the math. So this pusher sits, the center of this pusher sits exactly 3.25 millimeters off of where that dial would press up against the front of that case. That's a problem because as we've already measured here, where the front of this dial is to where the actual pusher is only 2.25 millimeters. So as we know, that's 1 millimeter difference. And that tells us that we need a spacer to go between that dial and the case lip that's 1 millimeter thick to bring that movement back enough that those pushers will line up right. That also brings us farther into the back of the case, which will determine whether or not this will fit at all. If you remember, it's 6 millimeters plus 1 millimeter, so we have 7 millimeters of total depth. And this movement is 5.35 millimeters. Total thickness from here to here, plus the 1 millimeter, I actually made it 0.9, I think that's going to work, is 5.35 plus 0.9 millimeters is 6.25, right? So we're looking at total depth of 7 millimeters, which means I can only have 0.75 millimeters from here to the back of the case, which means that the movement holder that I make cannot sit behind it more than 0.75 millimeters, which I've redesigned my original G10.212 movement holder. Actually, it's a G10.962, I believe, technically, but this does work with both of them. So I've shaved off a bunch off the back, and I've made that thinner, so I hope that's going to work. I haven't tested any of this. We're going to do that together, but hopefully this new ring has the right amount of depth to push this in properly without squishing it too much, and everything works out right. So another thing is we want to check is the depth or the width of this ring to make sure it'll fit in this case. I measured this ring. The width is 33.10 millimeters. That's the larger section of the ring. The inner section where that dial sits is 32.75. I know we're going through a lot of numbers here. You can get your own you can get your own calipers and you can measure this all yourself if you want, but I'm just telling you that the math shows that this dial will fit into that inner lip because this is only 31.7 and we're looking at 32.75, which is perfect. So next we go and we measure the movement ring. This is the old ring. This is the one with the thicker back. When you order a MoonSwatch moon phase, a genuine movement ring, this is what you get. This fits the 962 version of the G10, and we're looking at 32.97, right around 33 millimeters. So we know that this is going to slide in just fine to the back of this case. All right, so all that being said, I know there was a lot of numbers being thrown around. I know this is very confusing, but here's what we're looking at. We're looking at, yes, this should fit if we use a spacer ring that's notched to fit into that 2-notch step that they built into this. For some reason, the original case does not have that 2-step. It's just a single step. I'm trying to open this up so we can see. There's just a single step that dial sits on. There's no double step there. So this one has a double step. I'm not sure why. It's just the way it is. It's okay though. Like I said, I've developed this spacer ring to have a little tiny step in it. I don't know if we can see that. Let me see if we can, in order to focus it, I don't know if that's focused or not. And I don't know if you can see that, but there is just this tiny little step in that ring, and that fits just perfectly into that area which has that step in there, and it brings us, see how that sits in there? I don't know if you can tell how flush it is all the way around, but it sits nice and perfect, and it doesn't move around. It's perfect as far as what size we need. And the depth of this, let's find out how close I was. 0.89, so it's about 0.9 millimeters, which should bring us in that range where those pushers connect. All right, hey guys, I want to just take a quick pause before we assemble this thing and dive in just a smidge deeper and show you what I'm talking about when I talk about a stepped spacer ring that we're creating. This in here is the case, and I'm just going to zoom in as close as I can to stay focused. This right here is where the dial sits up against, the old dial. And this is a step out, so the outside of the case is actually wider than that space where the dial sat. And this depth right here is only maybe 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters. So in order to get 0.9 millimeters out here, that ring has to be stepped. So I'm going to show you here in the design program. This is what we're looking at. So here's that ring, and you can see that step I've built into it, and that's going to fit into that step we just saw on the case. And back out here, so the whole ring all the way around it's got 2 steps, and that's going to fit into that little space that we just showed you. There's that lip again. Yeah, so, all right, that shows you that. I just wanted to dive in a little deeper so you could see it better. And we'll go back and start assembling the watch. All right, so that being said, we put the ring in there. That brings us back. We put the movement in, and then we put the movement ring in, which has been shaved on the back so that it'll fit now in the diminished dimensions. Sorry, that's the wrong case back. In the diminished dimensions that this allows. So that's the three-part that we're going to put in there. However, before we do that, I want to show you something. First, let's do this. And I want to do... This is the only way I can do it right now because otherwise the movement won't fit in there. And you can see here, what I'm about to show you is, again, this movement, the pushers for the chrono are way too long. There's no way, this can't even center up because they're preventing this from sliding this way because they're too long. So I need to go in there and trim those down about, I'm going to try 1 millimeter at first. We'll see how that works. I think that works on the other case, and I don't see any reason why this would be any different. They're both for VK63 movements. So these should be similar in that it only requires 1 millimeter to be taken off. So that being said, I could do it one of two ways. This has, if you look here, trying to get that in focus, these have little C-clips that attach these on. Once you pull that C-clip off, the whole pusher will come out of the case. I could do that. I don't trust that those C-clips won't break. I don't know the quality of these things, and I've had them break before trying to get them out or back on. And if that happens, this entire case, I can't finish the project, and I don't want to do that. I have good experience, however, putting a small protective lip plate in there and just using the Dremel directly on that, just shaving off 1 millimeter while it's still in the case. I haven't had too many problems with that, and it's easier for me, so that's what we're going to do. I'll show you a little bit of that right now. Okay, those are now shaved down. I have to clean the case out a little bit. Those are shaved down about 1 millimeter. We'll see if that fits now. I'm going to try to put everything together and see if it works after I clean this case out. Okay. So the first step is to put the ring in, and we want to make sure that's the right way. The step goes this way, so we want to make sure that side is down. Put that in there like this. Make sure that's seated well. And then I don't want to do this the traditional way because this ring will fall out, so we're going to place this in like this. We need to make sure we're in the right direction. That's the 3 o'clock. So that goes this way. Oh, we're way off here. There we go. All right, so that seems like the pushers are lining up. Now we got to put that case back on. I'm sorry, the movement ring that I made thinner. I don't know if you can tell, but this is the original, and you can see how thick that is right there. I don't know if you can tell. Oh, I'm sorry. I I can't really tell if you can see that, but back here along the back rim, that's very thick. And now I've dropped it into the plate a little bit and I've made it a little thinner. So now we have the proper depth between the back and the case, I think, hopefully. The biggest thing with this has a notch in it that goes with the notch that's at the 6 o'clock position. So we need to make sure we line that up when we put this in. Question is, I don't think that worked. I need to there we go. That's lined up now. Before I go any further, I want to put that stem in. So that it's not spinning when I screw the case back on. And to do that, I will need a G10.212 stem. G10.212 stems. So let's get a brand new one so we know that it's long enough. And we're going to use the G10, sorry, not the G10. We're going to use the Pagani Design crown because we know that one fits better. Okay. That's in place. Now the moment of truth, let's see if the case back slides on. Look at that. It looks pretty good. We're going to make sure that crown doesn't go over too far as we tighten this back. All right, so that's in there very snug. As you can see that when I try to push on the stem, it's not moving around. The movement is not moving around in there. It's very, very well put together. So the question now is, and I want to move this back just a little bit. There we go. I want to make sure with this stem being centered and those pushers being in the right locations, whether or not the stopwatch pushers will line up. So there we go. And you notice that it's not lining up with the 12 o'clock position. The easy way to fix that is to put it into the second position. Or maybe it's, sorry, do I have it in the third? Okay, that's the one for the, yeah. You see how I'm, there we go. And then you push it back into the first position. So if you didn't know, you can what do you call it? You can calibrate these by using that second position and these two buttons if it ever gets off. You can also do that with the PE50. Now she'll center on the right location. The only thing about this is that it sits a little deeper in that case. I don't know if you can tell. It's really hard to tell, but that dial is, of course, sunken back in there about 1 millimeter. With the black spacer ring, it's very hard to tell that anything is off. It just does sit in there a little deeper than I would prefer. You know, I'd like it a little closer to the crystal. Not the end of the world, and you get used to that. But it is something to consider that with this, just you're not looking at a 0.4 or a 0.5 or even a 0.6 millimeter as with the original case, this case here. Sometimes with the original MoonSwatch movements, you have to put a spacer in these as well. But now it's a full 0.9 millimeters, and that depth is, it's in there. So, all right. So we know it works. Now all we have to do is cut the stem and put it together, put the gasket in there. I think there already has a gasket in there, but just make sure everything's put together. We got to cut that stem first and foremost, and then this will be done. It looks like it's working. It's, it definitely fits. This case is a much better profile for my wrist personally. So I personally like it better than the original VK63 case that we've been using. If we can get used to the depth of that movement is in there, then this is a great solution if you don't like the original case, how it sticks up so far. So, all right, let's put this together. I'm going to cut the stem off screen. I'm going to put the strap on, and I'll show you the final result when it's done. All right? All right, here we are, the big reveal. So, as you can see, we've cut that stem and installed the crown. If you want to see how to do something like that, it's in my other videos. I don't show it on every video because I've already shown it 4 times before. That's about, yeah, and the case back is nice and flush here. I don't know if you can tell. That gasket is compressed just nicely, so it fits really well. We've got the Pagani Design crown, remember we talked about? The Pagani Design case back. We'll see if we can maybe fix that in the future. Once supply chains open up a bit more, and I can maybe see if I can find a 6 millimeter crown. As we've talked about with that 0.9 millimeter spacer in there, that dial is sunk a little bit. It's noticeable if you're looking at it, and it seems like it is sunk into the watch, but it's not a bad look, and it's not something that looks, obnoxious, especially if you're not comparing it against a watch that doesn't have that. So it's nice. It fits well. It's let me put it on my wrist. It sits nice and flush against the wrist compared to that other one. It feels like a more contained watch. The lip that's on that crown, the lip that's on that bezel for the original VK63 case, I feel like it just sticks up too much. It's just a weird feel to me. I don't personally care for it. I like this one better. So that's that band that we talked about. I left links to all this, the band and everything in the first part of this series. So if you want to look at that, go look in that first video if you haven't seen it already. I'll leave a link to that first video in the description in case you are coming to this one first. But the first video, we installed a PE50 replica dial and movement into this case, and now we're doing the genuine. So this is the G10.212 from the genuine MoonSwatch. It's an ETA movement. Yeah, so that's a nice looking watch. There's the finish. There's the reveal. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any suggestions for what I should do next. I actually have a little side project that I wanted to do. It's watch related, but it's not building a watch per se. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay tuned to all that fun stuff that we do on this channel. And I'll see you on the next one.